It was a quiet December afternoon in the small French town of Millas. A school coach full of children was heading home from classes. On the tracks ahead, a train was rushing toward the crossing. No one expected what would happen in the next few seconds. In a tragic instant, lives were lost, families were shattered, and the community was left asking a haunting question. Could this disaster have been prevented? This is the story of the 2017 Millas level crossing collision, the crash that shocked a nation. Millas is a small town in the far south of France, with just over 4,200 residents. It lies in the scenic Occitania region, about 9 miles or 14.5 kilometres west of Perpignan, and 38 miles or 61 kilometres south of Narbonne. Millas sits on the railway line that connects Perpignan to Villefranche-de-Conflans. This line opened back in 1895 and is mostly double-tracked and partially electrified. Today, it mainly carries regional passenger trains. Around the site of the accident, trains can reach speeds of up to 62 miles or 100 kilometres per hour. The crash occurred at a level crossing on a single-track section. The crossing was protected by half barriers, red warning lights, and an acoustic alarm that sounds when a train is approaching. The road crossing the tracks, called Route de Tuire or D612, is paved and has 3 lanes, one in each direction, plus a blocked lane in the middle for turning lanes at nearby intersections. The train involved in the crash was travelling eastbound on the line from Villefranche-de-Conflans to Perpignan. It was a regional service operated by SNCF, known as TER 877660. On that day, the train was made up of a Z7369 unit, part of SNCF's TER Regional Express Service. At the time of the accident, it is unclear how many passengers were on board. In the cab were 2 people, 40-year-old Miss Vanderville, a trainee driver who had only been on the job a few months, and Mr. Madeira, who was observing her training and monitoring her actions. At the same time, approaching the level crossing from the south, was a school bus carrying 23 students from a local secondary school on their way home. The bus was a chartered Carosa C955, a 2-axle intercity model introduced in 2001. On that day, the bus was driven by 46-year-old Miss Oliveira, who had been working as a driver since April of the same year. On December 14th, SNCF train Z 7369 departed Millas station at 4:01 p.m, running 9 minutes behind schedule. The train was under the control of trainee driver Miss Vanderville, on only her 3rd trip on this line, with her colleague Mr. Madeira in the cab as an instructor. As the train accelerated through 43.5 miles or 70 kilometres per hour, Miss Vanderville saw a bright white school bus moving into the level crossing just ahead. The bus bent the barrier as it entered the tracks. She later recalled that each second felt like an eternity. Reacting quickly, Vanderville sounded the train's whistle and triggered an emergency stop, but the bus kept inching forward. Miss Vanderville kept hoping the bus would somehow move out of the way, speed up, back up, anything to avoid the collision. There was nothing more she or her instructor could do. The train's brakes were fully applied, yet the crash was now unavoidable. Mr. Madeira later recalled the terrifying certainty. No matter what happened, they were going to hit the bus. He remembered thinking, if it stops, we hit the middle. If it speeds up, the back. If it backs up, the front. In the final moments, Mr. Madeira threw himself to the floor of the cab, shielding himself as best he could. Miss Vanderville remained at her controls, hoping the bus was empty, her hand never leaving the whistle, sounding it continuously as the train closed in. At 4:03 p.m, the train struck the bus on the right-hand side, almost perfectly in the middle, travelling at 43.5 miles or 70 kilometres per hour. A deafening crash echoed across the fields as the train cut the bus in two, sending both halves spinning away from the level crossing. The train continued for a few hundred meters before finally coming to a stop. Miraculously, everyone on the train was unharmed, but at the crossing, the scene was horrific. 4 people were killed instantly, and 20 more were injured, most of them severely, including all of the students and bus driver. As the train finally came to a stop, Miss Vanderville looked around and noticed a cell phone on the floor of the cab. It wasn't hers, and it wasn't Mr. Madeira's. Only then did the reality begin to hit her. Witnesses were already calling emergency services. The first units arrived at the scene by 4:15 p.m., just 12 minutes after the crash. 15 minutes later, local authorities declared a catastrophic event. It was only when she heard the sirens and the helicopters arriving that Vanderville began to understand. The bus was not empty. The phone had been thrown through the train's windshield as the bus broke apart, belonging to one of the passengers. Over 150 emergency responders rushed to the scene. 4 helicopters airlifted the most severely injured survivors to nearby hospitals. Tragically, one of the initial survivors died the next day, and another held on until December 18th. By then, doctors were still fighting to save 5 more survivors, who eventually pulled through. All of the victims were from Millas, and the accident shook the small town to its core. People were desperate for answers. How could a bus end up in the path of a train at a crossing that was as well protected as possible? Investigators quickly ruled out alcohol or drugs. Neither the train drivers nor the bus driver tested positive. All 3 were properly licensed and within their duty time limits. Miss Vanderville had not been speeding, travelling well below the 62 miles or 100 kilometers per hour speed limit when she applied the emergency brakes. The bus, too, was moving slowly, no more than 7.5 miles or 12 kilometers per hour at the moment of impact. This meant a common cause of level crossing accidents, a driver trying to beat the train, was not a factor in this tragedy. Miss Oliveira, the bus driver, consistently claimed that the barriers were definitely up. But other witnesses, including people in a car on the opposite side of the tracks and passengers in a following bus, remembered things differently. Some said the barriers were down, others said they were up, and a few even recalled them moving as the bus approached. In total, 6 witnesses insisted the barriers were down, 23 said they were up, and 4 described them as being in motion. Investigators discovered that the mechanism for the barrier the bus likely hit was actually in the down position, contradicting most witness memories. It is thought that many surviving passengers remembered the barriers as being up because they could not understand why the bus would enter the crossing if the barriers were down. Following the investigation, Miss Oliveira was placed under police suspicion for negligent manslaughter on December 20th. Within days of the accident, 3 separate investigations were launched. The Public Prosecutor's Office began looking into possible legal consequences, while SNCF and the French Investigative Bureau for Traffic Accidents, known as BEATT, focused on the technical side, trying to understand how such a tragedy could happen. By late December 2017, SNCF released their findings. They confirmed that both the train and the level crossing equipment were in perfect working order. The train crew had done nothing wrong, and the barriers were most certainly down when the bus entered the crossing. The train had been running behind schedule, but investigators found this had no effect on the accident. The crossing does not operate on a timetable. It is activated automatically by approaching trains. Almost a year after the accident, in October 2018, the results of a detailed technological investigation were made public. The investigation concluded that the accident was caused by human error, placing the blame on Miss Oliveira. There was nothing wrong with the bus itself. Data from the bus showed that it was moving at just 7.5 miles or 12 kilometers per hour before coming to a stop immediately before the collision. Despite this, Miss Oliveira continued, through her lawyer, to insist that the barrier had not been down. Her lawyer explained that, according to their view, the bus could not have moved halfway into the crossing if she had braked at the barrier, which she may have seen only at the last moment. Since Miss Oliveira would never knowingly drive through a closed barrier, her defence maintained that it must have been open, regardless of what the investigation concluded. In mid-May 2019, the French Investigative Bureau for Traffic Accidents, BEATT, released its official report. The report confirmed that the primary cause of the accident was human error by Miss Oliveira, but it also highlighted several factors that contributed to the tragedy. The bus had turned from a smaller street onto D612 just before the crossing, making a turn of more than 90 degrees to the left. While navigating this sharp turn, the driver had to watch for oncoming traffic and carefully steer the large bus between the sidewalk and two traffic islands. This divided attention could have made it harder to notice the level crossing ahead. The report criticised a 2009 inspection that had found no characteristics worth mentioning near the crossing. In reality, intersections were present on both sides, less than 82 feet or 25 metres from the tracks. A reenactment showed that as the bus pulled onto D612, a wooden pole may have hidden the red warning light from the driver's peripheral vision. By the time the bus straightened out, the lowered barrier would have been so close that it was hidden behind the dashboard, out of sight. The report also noted that the bus's weight meant the barrier offered little resistance, giving the driver no clear warning once it was out of view. Miss Oliveira passed the crossing up to 6 times a day, but in her 8 months on the job, her schedule had never required her to stop for a lowered barrier. This routine, combined with the difficult road layout and limited visibility, contributed to the bus entering the path of the oncoming train. Miss Oliveira's trial began in Marseille on September 19, 2022. The proceedings were even live-streamed to a community centre in nearby Perpignan, so the residents of Millas could follow the case. Throughout the trial, Oliveira tearfully insisted that the barriers had been up, that no lights or alarms sounded, and that she never saw the train coming. She described how the accident continues to haunt her, replaying the moment of impact and the bus being torn apart in her mind. Investigators acknowledged that some witnesses agreed with her, claiming the barriers were up, but technical evidence confirmed that the barriers had been down. Other witnesses, including a driver stopped on the opposite side of the tracks, also confirmed this fact. The trial was interrupted on September 22nd when Oliveira collapsed in court, suffering a stress-induced heart condition, and had to be rushed to hospital. After a brief pause, the trial resumed and concluded on November 18, 2022. Oliveira was found guilty of negligent manslaughter in multiple cases. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison, 1 additional year of house arrest, and banned for life from working in public transportation. The Millas tragedy left a small town forever changed. The questions linger. Could this accident have been prevented? Are our level crossings safe enough, even in small towns? How much responsibility falls on individuals, and how much on the systems designed to protect us? We want to hear your thoughts. Share your views in the comments below.